Emily woke the next morning, her slumberous gaze mesmerized by Dillon's sleeping body. She rested her head against his warm chest, and her mind drifted over their relationship. As with anyone, he was full of quirks. She knew she would get used to them, but in the meantime, his fast-paced lifestyle was a big challenge for her. At first, their differences hadn't seemed so big because their relationship grew and blossomed in her world. Now that she was coexisting in his, there was a lot she needed to accept. Being a trophy girlfriend wasn't on her top 10 list of goals. However, since she'd moved to New York, Dillon seemed to push her into that role. When she'd gone out with him, he paraded her around to the few friends of his she'd met. She'd also noticed a possessive shift in his demeanor. Sometimes it was cute, in a boyfriend kind of way, but most of the time it was overbearing and confusing. Nonetheless, in that moment, as her senses soaked in him and all of the good he had done for her, Emily accepted their relationship for what it was. She curled closer to him, moving a wayward strand of hair away from his forehead. Letting out a yawn, he smiled at her. "You're up early." His voice was husky from just waking. "I must not have done a good job sexing you into a coma last night." Playfully nuzzling her nose in the crook of his arm, she smiled. "If you had sexed me into a coma, you would never be able to be with me again, sir." "Ah, you are incorrect, my love. I'd still take it from you, coma or not." "That's just sick," she giggled, sitting up. A predatory glimmer sparkled in his brown eyes. "Ready for round 2? "Aren't you taking me to breakfast this morning like you promised?" "Of course I am." "Well, I have to be at work by 10 o'clock and I still need to shower." "You know I'm good for a quickie if need be," he said, rising to his feet and pulling her up. Unable to say no, she followed without a fight as he undressed them both before they reached the bathroom. She propped herself on the vanity and watched him turn on the water. She felt the edgy energy radiating from his body as he strolled over to her, wearing a boyish grin that got her every time. He pulled her to him and kissed her so softly, she felt her lips shiver against his. She couldn't free herself from the hypnotic spell of his kiss if she wanted to. With his hands smoothing everywhere, branding his hot touch against her skin, fervor fueled in her blood, making her body strain for more. He shifted his mouth to the valley between her breasts and slid his tongue across her nipple. It drove her wild. Staring up at her, he sucked and swirled his tongue around its taut peak. "You like that, don't you?" "Yes," she breathed, as her hands gripped his hair. With a slow, maddening pace, he tunneled his fingers inside her wet pussy. The pressure was excruciatingly wonderful and correlated with the sudden tightening sensation between her legs. He pushed harder against her mouth while she dug her nails into his back. Dillon groaned when she ran her hands across his chest, her fingers slowly sliding down every muscled ridge on his abdomen. She wrapped her legs around his waist, and he carried her into the shower. He backed her against the wall, and she let out a gasp of pleasure when he sank perfectly deep inside her. Her every nerve ending lit on fire as their bodies melded together as one. "Oh, Christ, you feel so good, Em," he hissed, his voice thick with desire. Emily clung to his shoulders as hot water trickled down their bodies. Her ache for him increased with every pulse and thrust. With their lips locked, Emily clenched her legs tighter around his waist and arched her body against his, taking everything he had to give. Dillon's eyes dilated when he felt her hot, slick flesh contract around him. Emily moaned out in satisfied completion when she felt Dillon jerk, shudder, and tremble against her. Burying his face in her neck, he let out a guttural groan as he climaxed. When he pulled back, their gazes met and locked, holding steady as their breathing slowed. "I love you, Emily," he said as he gently placed her down and pulled her into him. "I'm happy you're here with me." "I love you too. I'm sorry for the way I acted last night before you left." She feathered kisses across his chest.